Hello, welcome back to My Husband's Ex-Wife is a Complete Bitch. Today I actually wanted to talk about something much more lighthearted. A lot of my previous videos were like kind of deep or long or drawn out. And I just wanted to get back to what I originally had in mind when I started this channel, which was just talking about useless information that was kind of fascinating to if you're weird, you know what I mean? And I can't do makeup, I don't sing, I don't do windows, I'm not a vegan, I have no positive outlooks. So, I mean, I'm just, I don't know, trying to make something fun. So with that in mind, I would like 5 to 10 minutes of your time to talk about pumpkins. And more specifically, the Pumpkin King, Howard Dill. And Howard Dill was kind of a badass, so please stay tuned in conversations that don't help with making friends or trivia. So pumpkins are actually one of the oldest cultivated crops in the world. So they have been around for about 10,000 years being cultivated, originating in Mexico. I read somewhere that the seeds came from Asia, but I'm not really sure if that's true or not. But they have been cultivated in North America, in Mexico, the United States, and Canada for at least 7,000 years. And the word pumpkin actually there's two theories on where the word pumpkin came from. One, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, they say that the word was originally ancient Greek for melon and then was translated into Latin and then into French and then into early English. And then it became the word pumpkin, which again, Oxford English Dictionary says that that's the T. However, the Wopenack Reclamation Project, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, the Wopenack Reclamation Project, which was started out of MIT in Massachusetts, and they're really smart. They propose that it's actually a Massachusetts word, which is very similar to the word pumpkin, and also the Massachusetts people invented the word squash. So me personally, I tend to side with the MIT people. Sorry, Oxford English Dictionary. A pumpkin is actually not any different than a squash. It's basically like a Cocker Spaniel or a Bulldog. Like they're both dogs. They're both made of the same stuff with slight differences. But a pumpkin is basically just a type of squash, or more specifically, a winter squash. And they are grown for a variety of different reasons, and they have changed dramatically in shape and presentation over those 7,000, 10,000 years, especially once the Halloween pumpkins came in. But a gourd, a pumpkin, a squash, blah, 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 they're all basically the same thing. The oldest pumpkin recipe actually is from 1670. It was a recipe with like that slow cooked pumpkin and boil it down and put in some butter and spices. And that recipe is actually even still used today. Like when I was growing up on the East Coast, it's very common to have like mashed root, slow cooked vegetables prepared in that way. So that's where it carried on to. However, in the 1700s, it became very like pumpkin was like the quinoa or like the kale or like what it was like this like whatever. We're gonna try to make a nice, cute, fashionable food out of pumpkin. So there's a lot of pumpkin recipes in the 1700s. But by the 1800s, the most common way, the most practical standard way to use pumpkins in cooking was in pies, the very famous pumpkin pie, or in desserts. And it continues to be the most popular way the pumpkin is consumed to this day. However, now a lot of people in Asia eat pumpkins, specifically the Japanese breed, kabocha. And they eat it in stews or broths or barbecue it or whatever, right? And even though most of the squash and pumpkin were like indigenous or endemic, do you use that word? Even though most squash are native to North America, the vast majority of them are now grown in Asia, between China and India. Industrial pumpkin farming, I suppose you would call it, started in the late 1800s to the early 1900s. And the very first pumpkin festival was in 1903 in Ohio. So the Midwest was they were like a major player in the pumpkin growing scene, just because there was a lot of factories. They were getting infrastructure, especially towards the First and Second World War. There was just a lot of space and manpower available to make things like canneries, where people would go and bring their produce to be canned and pureed and marketed and sold. And also people would come and just display their produce for it to be sold. And the industrial pumpkin market was heavily represented in places like Ohio. Ohio is like the most famous place. Connecticut, they were the ones who invented the pumpkin that we would like when you think of a pumpkin now, that pumpkin came from Connecticut. There was also a lot of pumpkin farming happening in Missouri and then Ontario and Nova Scotia. But around the early 1900s, like 1903, Canada was like not really like, I guess it was a country, but it wasn't really a country at that point. So most of it was happening in the US, but a lot of Canadians were going down to take part in that. So some people would think that the Midwest is the most iconic place for pumpkins, but I say no, ma'am. I say that my hometown, Windsor, Nova Scotia, is the most iconic pumpkin place in the world because of Howard Dill. So Howard Dill was a badass. Howard Dill was born in 1934 in Windsor, Nova Scotia, to a farm, or he wasn't born to a farm. He was born into a family of a farming family that had been there for 5 generations. So 5 generations to own a farm is a long effing time, especially in 1934. And his family were known for producing a lot of gourds, squash, other types of vegetables, and cattle as well. I'm not sure if they produced it for meat or milk or whatever, but they did have a lot of cattle on their farm. Howard Dill dropped out of school in grade 6, or right at the end of grade 6. Some people say grade 7, some people say grade 6, but around grade 6, he dropped out of school and went to study pumpkins full time. Like what were you doing when you were in grade 6? I was playing with my joystick and some games. I wasn't studying pumpkins. So already it's like, wow, you dropped out of school to study them full time. His family still has his journals, and it was said that Howard would just sit and stare at pumpkins all the time. He drew pictures of pumpkins. He took notes about pumpkins. He was obsessed with how to breed pumpkins, how to grow different types of pumpkins. And he was a voracious reader of gardening magazines, horticultural magazines, a lot of stuff on botany. And he would just read, that was all, he dedicated his life to making his own signature pumpkin. So Howard, over the next 30 years, I would say, so he had gotten to adulthood. He'd been working on his dad's farm. They never wanted to grow like giant pumpkins or anything originally, but he was obsessed with creating like the perfect pumpkin. And he took many, many years to perfect his method of crossbreeding pumpkins. And it was said that he, unlike other pumpkin farmers, he did it all by hand. So he didn't use any bees or any pollinators to cross-pollinate his plants. He would genetically splice different types of plants through pollination and different like cultivation methods. And he did everything by hand, by isolating them. So he would just like take, I don't even know how you do that. How do you inseminate a pumpkin? I don't know. But he did it. And he did that for a very long time. So him and his dad would always like peddle their wares. They would go down, or like his family members would go down to Ohio and Missouri and Connecticut, all across the American Midwest, to sell their pumpkins, to sell their seeds, to get their food pureed, and to participate in festivals or pumpkin competitions, be competitive pumpkin growers. And they were like having a good time. But then in 1976, Howard went to a pumpkin festival in Ohio and saw this guy bring out this like massive pumpkin. And he was like, oh no, bitch. Oh no. He's like, I'm gonna go make a better pumpkin than you. He was just like, when he saw that, he was like, no, I'm the pumpkin king, honey. I'm gonna make this big pumpkin. So then he went back and really set out at making his own pumpkin seed that would grow the world's largest pumpkin. And in 1980, he succeeded in getting a Guinness World Records for the largest pumpkin at 459 pounds, I think. 459 pounds was his pumpkin, and people were like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, he's got this big pumpkin. And then people started copying his methods a little bit. In 1981, a year later, he beat his record again and got a new world record for the largest world's pumpkin, or the largest pumpkin in the world, which was 493 pounds. So after this, Howard retired, I suppose, from competitive pumpkin farming, but he did patent the formula for his seed called the Atlantic Giant in 1979. And since then, I would say like 99% of all of the largest pumpkins in the world are all derived from Howard's seed that he patented in 1979. And presently at this day, some of the largest, like his pumpkin was 493 pounds, his largest one. Today, the largest pumpkin is in excess of 2,600 pounds. So that has mostly to do with the proliferation of fertilizers, new technology to make better pumpkins. like the water, and people will like put blankets on their pumpkins now. There's just a lot of more technology available, but they all still come from that same seed. They also use fungi. Like, I thought that was cool too. They can use like fungus and they can put it into the pumpkin and make the pumpkin grow. So what else can you use for a pumpkin? So first of all, these giant pumpkins can't be eaten because their rind is about a foot thick and they're made mostly of water. So you can also make pumpkins for Halloween. There's the classic Halloween pumpkin. There's other decorative pumpkins with blistering features. There's a lot of pumpkins that are bred specifically for pie. Once again, there is the Japanese pumpkin kabocha, which is excellent for cooking. But there's also jack-o'-lanterns. So there's a whole other history on like the jack-o'-lantern history, which is like, I don't want to talk about that. But yeah, pumpkins can do that too. And giant pumpkins are excellent jack-o'-lanterns. A couple of my neighbors had giant pumpkins when I was growing up, and the jack-o'-lanterns are like sick. They're really, really good. And what else can you do with the pumpkin? Make it into a boat, honey. Take her ass down to the lake, paint her up, cut her in half, and race it across the lake. And when I was growing up, I thought that my town was the only people who did that grew giant pumpkins and raced them across the lake. But in my research, I discovered that this is actually quite a common thing now all across the United States. There's pumpkin festivals that happen to this day, and it is a very common thing to do with giant pumpkins, is just have a boat race. A regatta, honey. A regatta, whatever. Also, guess who was a huge fan of our boat race? Martha Helen Stewart, honey. Martha Helen Stewart. Martha Stewart. Sorry, I should stop swearing. But Martha Stewart had actually planned to come race in the Windsor, Nova Scotia boat race in 2005, I believe. But she had just gone to prison for perjury. So her parole officer was like, no, it's not happening. And yeah, that is the exciting story of pumpkins, giant pumpkins, the badass that's Howard Dill. And I hope that you loved it. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and be kind to each other. Okay? Thank you. Bye-bye.